Thomas didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Despite his fear and the chaos in his mind, he kept crawling through the dark tunnels, searching for an exit. He felt the walls around him, looking for any sign that he hadn't gone completely off course. He left small items behind to mark his path. A shoe, a torn trash bag, pieces of his clothing. Each item was a marker, a hope that one day he could find what he had left behind. After hours of wandering with no sign of the exit, Thomas came across a narrow crack in the rock. It was a small opening in the wall, barely 1.2 meters deep and just wide enough to try and crawl through. Maybe this crack would lead to an open space, or even back to the entrance of the cave. For a moment, he felt a flicker of hope. Slowly, he began lowering himself into the gap, trying to find a ledge in the rock to steady himself. But as soon as his hips passed the narrowest point, he realized the mistake. He was stuck. His body was wedged between the sharp rock walls that held him in place. He tried to push himself up, but it was as if the rocks were holding him there. He pushed with his hands against the walls, but his body wouldn't budge. He kicked his legs, using the little strength he had left, but each movement only seemed to push him deeper into the crack. He was stuck. There was no way out. The hours turned into days, and his body grew weaker. His arms were exhausted from hours of crawling, and his legs could no longer support him. He had no strength left to free himself. He began scratching at the rocks with his hands, hoping to find something to help him escape. But the rocks were hard and unyielding. There was no progress. Even if he had shouted for help, no one would have heard his voice in the silence of the cave. Time passed, and Thomas became more aware of his situation. He hadn't eaten or drunk anything since he entered the cave, and he was growing severely dehydrated. Hours became days. No one knew where he was because he hadn't told anyone which cave he was planning to explore. His wife grew worried when he didn't come home. She called the police, but the search was difficult. They didn't know exactly where to look. They searched the cave where they thought he had been, but couldn't find any trace of him. It took days before they finally found his car parked near the entrance to Black Cave. Rescue teams were sent, but they were unfamiliar with the obscure side tunnels that Thomas had taken. They searched the cave but missed the narrow passage that Thomas had entered. They went through all the known sections, but there was no sign of him. Meanwhile, far underground, Thomas's condition worsened. His breathing slowed, becoming shallow and uneven. His mind began to drift, caught between reality and exhaustion. The days passed, and eventually the search was called off. Thomas was officially declared missing. No one knew where he was. However, his wife continued to fight for answers.